Jericho, a city that seemed unshakable. Its gigantic walls rose imposingly, surrounding a rich and prosperous civilization. Its inhabitants trusted in the solidity of those walls and in their pagan deities, believing they were invincible. Within the city, luxury and pleasure reigned, and sin spread like a silent disease. But then, something extraordinary happened. Without weapons of war, without direct attacks, without any logical explanation, the walls collapsed. The city that seemed impregnable was reduced to ruins. What really happened to Jericho? What was the sin that led this city to destruction? And most concerningly, are we repeating the same mistakes today? Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you are about to discover may change the way you see the world. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, from which city are you watching? I want to know just how far this message is reaching. Jericho was not just any city. It was a milestone in the history of humanity, one of the first great urban centers in the world. Over 10,000 years ago, this city already existed and thrived. Located in a strategic position in the Jordan Valley, its source of fresh water amid the desert made it a true oasis. It was a place of commerce, agriculture, and wealth. The inhabitants of Jericho discovered early on how to cultivate the land, store food, and build fortifications. As a result, the city became one of the most important hubs in the region. Merchants traveled from afar to trade spices, fabrics, and precious metals. The city's temples were richly decorated, and its rulers lived surrounded by luxury and extravagance. But there was a dark side behind that splendor. Jericho was not just a commercial and agricultural center, it was also a stronghold of idolatry and perversion. Its temples were dedicated to pagan deities, and macabre rituals took place daily. Human sacrifices were offered to gods of stone and clay. Children were burned alive in acts of worship, believed to bring fertility and prosperity. Sacred prostitution was part of the religious cult, where women were forced to lie with priests in pursuit of blessings. The city was engulfed in corruption and sin, completely estranged from the ways of God. But to the inhabitants of Jericho, everything seemed normal. They believed they were safe, that nothing could threaten them. Their walls, built with gigantic stones, were about 12 meters high and so wide that soldiers could walk upon them. The city was designed to withstand any attack. Its supply of water and grain allowed it to endure long periods of siege without suffering from hunger or thirst. To the residents, Jericho was an impregnable fortress. They trusted in their wealth, in their armies, and in their gods. Yet they were about to learn a lesson. When God decides to act, no wall is strong enough to resist. The Bible tells us in the book of Joshua that the people of Israel received an unexpected command from God. Instead of attacking Jericho with military force, Joshua and his warriors were to simply march around the city in silence for 6 days. On the 7th day, they were to circle Jericho 7 times, blow trumpets, and at the end, shout with all their might. To the Israelites, this strategy seemed strange. To the inhabitants of Jericho, it seemed like a joke. They laughed, watching the people march without lifting a single finger against their walls. But what happened on the 7th day was something no one could have imagined. When the Israelites completed the final circuit and shouted, an earthquake began to shake the city. The walls started to crack. In a matter of seconds, the entire structure crumbled. What had seemed impregnable was reduced to rubble. The people of Israel entered and completely destroyed the city as God had commanded. Jericho, the great symbol of power and arrogance, was swept off the map. But here is the big question: why was Jericho destroyed in this manner? The answer lies not only in its wealth or its geographical position, but in what the city represented spiritually. Jericho was a symbol of rebellion against God. It was a place where idolatry, corruption, and immorality knew no bounds. Its inhabitants lived in excess, without fear, without respect for the Creator. The destruction of Jericho was not just a historical event, it was a warning to all of humanity. And here is something even more frightening. The story of Jericho is not just about the past. The same mistakes of that city are being repeated today. Look around you. The modern world is also building walls, not of stone, but of pride, money, and arrogance. Many people trust more in their wealth than in God. Pleasure and the pursuit of power have become the priority, while spiritual values are ignored. Immorality, once condemned, is now celebrated. And just like Jericho, many people believe they are invincible. But what happens when the walls fall? History proves that empires that thought themselves eternal were destroyed. Babylon, Rome, Sodom, and Gomorrah, each of these civilizations thrived, succumbed to corruption, and fell into ruins. And the pattern is always the same. When a society abandons God and believes it can live without Him, its destruction is inevitable. Yet not everyone in Jericho was destroyed. There was a woman named Rahab. She was not a princess, nor a ruler, nor a priestess. On the contrary, Rahab was a prostitute, but she had heard about the God of Israel and feared the Lord. When the Israelite spies arrived in Jericho, Rahab hid them and pleaded for her family to be spared. She knew that destruction was coming and decided to turn to God. Because of her faith, she and her family were the only inhabitants of Jericho to be saved. Rahab became a powerful example that God does not reject those who repent. Later, she entered the lineage of Jesus Christ, proving that God can transform any story. This means that even amidst corruption and decay, there is hope for those who choose to trust in God. Now think about it. What are the walls you have built in your life? Have you been trusting more in money, status, and pleasure than in God? Jericho teaches us that no human fortress can resist the power of the Creator. When He decides to act, there is no army, wealth, or wall that can hinder His plan. If this message resonates with you, declare in the comments, "My trust is in the Lord." This not only strengthens your faith, but also shows the world that you have chosen to trust in the one true God. Jericho teaches us something powerful. What appears unbreakable in human eyes can be destroyed in an instant when God decides to act. Its inhabitants believed that their city was impregnable, that their wealth would protect them, and that their gods would keep them safe. But the truth is that no wall can withstand the divine will, and this leads us to an important reflection. What are the walls you have built in your life? Today, many live within their own walls of self-sufficiency. We trust in money, in the stability of a job, in social recognition, believing these things can shield us from all difficulties. But the story of Jericho reminds us that when we place our faith solely in the material, we are building on a fragile foundation. The world may seem strong and invincible, yet at any moment its structures can crumble. It takes just one event, a financial crisis, an unexpected loss, a sudden change, for everything to collapse. And then, where is your trust? The fall of Jericho was not an isolated event. It marked the beginning of the conquest of the promised land by the Israelites. God not only destroyed that city, but also sent a warning to all the surrounding nations. His people were coming, and no one could stop their victory. Fear gripped the neighboring cities, for it became clear that it was not merely a human army marching, but a people guided by God Himself, and this message remains valid today. God still fights for those who trust in Him. And just as the walls of Jericho fell, any obstacle in your life can be removed if you remain steadfast in faith. But now, think of the other side of the story. Imagine the inhabitants of Jericho in the moments before the destruction. For 6 days, they watched the Israelite army march around their walls. On the first day, they laughed. On the second, they began to wonder what was happening. On the third, doubt set in. On the fourth, tension grew. On the fifth and sixth days, fear began to take hold. And then, on the seventh day, when everything collapsed, despair was total. How many people in Jericho could have repented? How many could have followed Rahab's example and sought God's mercy? Instead, they trusted in their walls, in their wealth, in their pagan beliefs, and were destroyed. And that leads us to a crucial question. Are we doing the same today? We live in a society where sin is celebrated, where the pursuit of pleasure is encouraged above all morality. Just like Jericho, the modern world is full of idolatry, corruption, and immorality. People place their trust in science, technology, politics, money, everything except God. And history shows us that this always leads to ruin. Sodom and Gomorrah, Babylon, Rome, each of these civilizations fell because they rejected God. Jericho was merely the first of many cities to be destroyed by divine judgment. But God always gives a chance to those who choose to turn to Him. Rahab is proof of that. She was not perfect. She did not have an honorable past, but she made a decision. She recognized the true God and asked for mercy. And she was saved. This teaches us that no matter how far you are, no matter how wrong your past may have been, if you turn to God, He can restore you. Now think for a moment. What are the walls that need to fall in your life? Have you been relying on your own strength, ignoring the need for God? Have you been living trapped in a lifestyle that distances you from His presence? Jericho teaches us that true security is not found in wealth, power, or pleasure. It is found in obedience and trust in God. And more than that, this story teaches us that the impossible can happen. In human eyes, there was no logic in what the Israelites did. No military strategy could have brought down those walls. But God does not operate according to human logic. He works in the supernatural. He makes the unimaginable happen. Just as He brought down the walls of Jericho, He can tear down any barrier in your life. Perhaps you are facing difficulties that seem insurmountable. Perhaps they are financial problems, family challenges, illnesses, or internal battles that no one else sees. But remember, God does not need weapons or human strategies to win a battle. He can transform any situation in an instant, and if you trust in Him, you will see His walls fall. Now, I want to extend an invitation to you. If this message has touched your heart, declare in the comments, "My victory comes from the Lord." This not only reinforces your faith, but can also impact others who are watching. If God brought down the walls of Jericho, He can also tear down any obstacle in your life. And before we conclude, there is something even more impressive about this story. Jericho fell because it was full of sin, but a new Jericho was rebuilt in the future. In the New Testament, we find Jesus passing through this city and transforming lives. This shows us that even after destruction, God can bring restoration. He not only tears down walls, He also builds something new. If you believe that God can transform your life, leave your Amen in the comments. And if you want to learn more about how God judged other cities in the past, click on the video appearing on your screen now. You will discover how Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed and why this event holds profound significance to this day.